My name is Don Reynolds, 67 years old, and that evening changed everything. I was sitting at my son Thomas's elegant dining table when my phone buzzed. The text from an unknown number read, "Get up and go, now. Don't say anything to your son." After 30 years as a detective, I thought I had seen it all, but nothing prepared me for this moment. The tension in the room suddenly felt suffocating as I debated whether to trust this mysterious warning. If you are watching this, drop a comment telling me where you are viewing from, and hit subscribe if you want to know why police were about to knock on my son's door. Thomas and I have always had what I would call a complicated relationship. Not bad, just complicated. As a detective for the Chicago Police Department, I missed more baseball games and school plays than I care to admit. His mother Caroline did her best to fill the gaps, but after our divorce when Thomas was 12, things got even more strained. Still, we managed to stay close in our own way. Now at 38, Thomas has built himself quite the life. He runs a successful financial consulting business that specializes in helping wealthy clients manage their investments. 3 years ago, he married Stephanie, a stunning 35-year-old woman with a background in marketing. They make quite the power couple in their social circles. After I retired last year, Thomas suggested we start a monthly family dinner tradition. I was touched by the gesture, seeing it as his way of rebuilding our bond now that I finally had time. These dinners became something I looked forward to, even though I sometimes felt out of place in their world of luxury. That particular evening, I arrived at their home in Lincoln Park, a sprawling townhouse with modern furnishings that probably cost more than I made in my last 5 years on the force. The place always seemed a bit excessive to me, especially for just 2 people, but Thomas insisted it was important for impressing clients. Still, something about it never sat right with me. On a financial consultant's salary, even a successful one, this level of luxury seemed beyond reach. "Dad, come in!" Thomas greeted me at the door, giving me a quick hug before taking my coat. He was dressed in an expensive suit despite it being a family dinner at home. Another thing that struck me as odd. "The place looks great as always," I said, following him into the spacious living room where Stephanie was arranging appetizers on a silver platter. "Don, so good to see you," Stephanie said, embracing me with a practiced warmth that never quite reached her eyes. I had nothing concrete against my daughter-in-law, just an old detective's intuition that said she wasn't showing all her cards. The dinner began pleasantly enough with typical small talk about the weather and local news. Thomas poured expensive wine, and Stephanie served an elaborate dinner that looked like something from a fancy restaurant. But as we ate, I started noticing things. The subtle tension in Thomas's shoulders. The way Stephanie's smile tightened whenever he mentioned work. The meaningful glances they exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking. Halfway through the main course, Thomas's phone rang. "Sorry, I need to take this. Client emergency." He stepped into his home office, closing the door. This had become a pattern over the last few months. Always some urgent call interrupting our time together. While he was gone, Stephanie maintained polite conversation, but I noticed her eyes darting to the closed office door several times. When Thomas returned 15 minutes later, his forehead was creased with worry lines that disappeared as soon as he realized I was watching. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just a nervous client. The market has everyone on edge," he replied smoothly. Too smoothly. In my years on the force, I had interrogated enough suspects to recognize when someone was hiding something. The slight hesitation before speaking, the unconscious touching of the face, the relief when a subject is changed. Thomas was displaying all these signs, and my instincts were screaming. As we moved to dessert, Thomas excused himself again, this time heading to the kitchen. I watched as Stephanie followed him moments later. Through the partially open door, I glimpsed them in an intense, whispered conversation. Thomas looked agitated, running his hands through his perfectly styled hair, while Stephanie seemed to be reassuring him about something. During the past few months, I had noticed other concerning patterns. Thomas had been losing weight. His eyes often had dark circles beneath them. He would check his phone constantly, sometimes stepping outside to take calls even in bad weather. Twice, I had driven by his office late at night and seen lights on when most businesses were closed. Was I being paranoid? Was this just the hypervigilance that many cops develop after decades of seeing the worst in people? Or was my son in some kind of trouble? I considered asking him directly several times, but something held me back. Perhaps it was fear of straining our newly strengthened relationship, or maybe it was not wanting to face whatever truth might be revealed. Either way, I kept my concerns to myself, watching and waiting for more clues. As Stephanie served coffee and Thomas poured after-dinner drinks, their perfect host routine continued, but the undercurrent of tension remained palpable. I was about to finally broach the subject when my phone vibrated in my pocket, and everything changed. The text message glowed on my screen: "Get up and go. Now, don't say anything to your son." My heart skipped a beat as I read it again. The number wasn't saved in my contacts. No name. No previous messages. Just this urgent command. In my 30 years as a detective, I had learned to trust my instincts, and right now they were sending electric warnings up my spine. I glanced up. Thomas and Stephanie continued their conversation about an upcoming charity gala, seemingly oblivious to my sudden distress. My son laughed at something, his wife said, but the sound seemed hollow, forced. What was I supposed to do with this message? Ignore it as some kind of prank? But who would know I was here tonight? Our dinner tradition wasn't public knowledge. This had to be someone who knew both me and Thomas. My mind raced back through cases where similar situations had unfolded. I remembered the Donovan family, how a simple, anonymous tip had allowed me to evacuate them before their home was firebombed by a drug cartel. Then there was the Madison case, where ignoring a cryptic warning had resulted in the death of a key witness. "Dad, are you okay?" Thomas's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just tired, I guess," I managed, forcing a smile. "Mind if I use your bathroom?" "Of course. You know where it is." I excused myself, walking down the hallway to the powder room. Once inside, I locked the door and stared at the message again. Should I trust an anonymous text? My entire career had been built on verifying facts, not jumping at shadows. Just then, a second text arrived. "This is Agent Fisher, FBI. Your son is under investigation. Your presence compromises our operation. Leave now." FBI? This raised the stakes considerably. But it could still be a scam. In the age of technology, anyone could claim to be law enforcement. I decided to call the number. It rang once before going straight to voicemail with no personalized greeting. Before I could decide what to do next, a third message appeared. "Don't call again. Your line may be monitored. Exit the back door and walk 3 blocks north. Black sedan." This was feeling increasingly real. Specific instructions, awareness that I had just called, knowledge of the house layout. If this was legitimate, and Thomas was under FBI investigation, my presence could indeed complicate things. As a former law enforcement officer, I had a duty to cooperate. But as a father, what was my obligation to my son? I splashed cold water on my face, trying to think clearly. If Thomas was innocent, leaving wouldn't harm him. If he was involved in something illegal, warning him could constitute obstruction of justice, a line I had never crossed in my career. The thought of my son being investigated made my stomach turn, but the detective in me needed to know the truth, whatever it might be. With a heavy heart, I made my decision. I would follow the instructions and learn what was happening before taking any further action. I returned to the dining room, where Thomas and Stephanie were clearing dessert plates. "Everything all right, Dad?" Thomas asked, concern evident in his voice. "Actually, I just got a message from my neighbor Bill." I lied, hating myself for each false word. "His wife had a fall, and he needs help getting her to urgent care. I should head out." "That's terrible," Thomas said, though I noticed relief flickering across his features. "Was he glad to see me go? Do you want me to drive you?" No, I said quickly, perhaps too quickly. "I can manage. You two enjoy the rest of your evening." "At least let me call you a car," Thomas insisted. "I'd rather walk, clear my head a bit," I countered, gathering my coat. Stephanie stepped forward to hug me goodbye. "Take care, Don. We'll reschedule soon." I embraced my son, holding on perhaps a second longer than usual, wondering if this would be the last normal moment between us. "I love you, son," I said, my voice nearly catching. "Love you too, Dad," he replied, his brow furrowing slightly at my emotional tone. As I walked out the front door, I felt like the worst kind of traitor. Was I abandoning my son when he might need me most, or was I doing the right thing by following proper procedure? The uncertainty gnawed at me as I closed the door behind me, possibly closing a chapter in our relationship as well. The early evening air felt unusually cold as I walked away from my son's house, my mind racing with possibilities, none of them good. Each step felt like a betrayal, yet my law enforcement instincts kept me moving forward. 3 blocks north, just as instructed. I scanned each parked car, hyper-aware of my surroundings as decades of training kicked in. There it was, a black sedan with tinted windows, government plates partially obscured. I approached cautiously, hand instinctively moving toward where my service weapon would have been during my working years. The rear window rolled down partially, revealing a woman with short auburn hair and serious eyes. "Mr. Reynolds," she said. "Not a question. Please get in." "I need to see identification first," I replied firmly, standing my ground. Without hesitation, she held up a badge and ID card. "Special Agent Amanda Fisher, FBI Financial Crimes Division." I examined the credentials carefully, noting the security features I was familiar with from joint operations during my career. They appeared legitimate. Still cautious, I opened the door and slid into the back seat. "Thank you for cooperating," Agent Fisher said as the car pulled away from the curb. A male agent sat silently in the driver's seat, eyes on the road. "I understand this must be difficult for you. What exactly is this about?" I demanded, keeping my voice steady despite my churning stomach. "Why am I being pulled away from my son's house with cryptic text messages?" Fisher's expression remained professional but sympathetic. "Mr. Reynolds, your son Thomas is currently the subject of an ongoing federal investigation. We have reason to believe he is involved in a significant money laundering operation for the Caldwell organization." The Caldwell organization. Even I knew that name. Victor Caldwell, one of the most sophisticated crime bosses in the Midwest, had evaded prosecution for years, despite being linked to everything from fraud to murder. His operation specialized in white-collar crime with a violent enforcement arm. "That's impossible," I said immediately, the denial automatic and fierce. "Thomas is a financial consultant. He has a legitimate business, clients, an office downtown. He's not a criminal." Fisher sighed, opening a file folder on her lap. "We've been building this case for 7 months, Mr. Reynolds. Your son's business appears to be legitimate on the surface, but we've traced numerous transactions that follow classic money laundering patterns." She handed me several photographs. Thomas entering a private club known to be frequented by Caldwell associates. Thomas in deep conversation with a man I recognized from police bulletins as Jason Weber, Caldwell's financial advisor. Thomas accepting a briefcase from a known Caldwell lieutenant. My heart sank as I flipped through more evidence. Bank statements showing suspicious transfers, property purchases through shell companies, documented meetings with Caldwell organization members. This could all be explained, I insisted, but my voice lacked conviction. "Financial consultants meet with all kinds of people." "We have recorded conversations, Mr. Reynolds," Fisher said quietly. "I'm sorry." She played a short audio clip from her phone. Thomas's voice, unmistakable, discussing how to clean the latest batch and keep the transfers under reporting thresholds. The car felt suddenly airless. My son, my only child. The boy I had taught to ride a bike, to stand up to bullies, to always tell the truth. A money launderer for organized crime. "Why contact me?" I finally asked, my voice rough with emotion. "Why pull me out tonight specifically?" "We're executing a search warrant at your son's residence in approximately 20 minutes, Fisher explained. "Given your law enforcement background and your relationship with Thomas, we felt it was prudent to remove you from the situation." "You were worried I'd warn him," I stated flatly. "Or that you'd be caught in a difficult position," she countered. "We respect your service, Mr. Reynolds. We didn't want to put you in a situation where you'd have to choose between your son and your principles." The consideration surprised me, but it did little to ease the pain of what I was learning. "I want to know everything," I said firmly. "Before I make any judgments about my son, I need the complete picture, not just selected evidence to persuade me." Fisher hesitated, then nodded. "We believe Thomas was recruited about 2 years ago. His business was struggling, despite appearances. He had overextended on properties, including his house, and was facing potential bankruptcy. He never said anything," I murmured. "Most don't, especially to their parents," Fisher said. "According to our sources, Caldwell's people approached him with what seemed like legitimate investment opportunities. Small things at first, then gradually pulling him deeper." She continued sharing details about how Thomas had allegedly begun by simply offering financial advice, then moved to managing investments, and finally to full-scale money laundering, disguising drug money and other illegal proceeds as legitimate business income. The operation has grown significantly in the past year, Fisher explained. Thomas is now handling millions each month. And the FBI isn't the only one watching. The IRS and DEA are involved as well. As the evidence mounted, my denial crumbled. The late-night office visits, the nervous behavior, the lifestyle beyond his means. It all fit a pattern I had seen countless times during my career, but had been blind to in my own son. "What happens now?" I asked, feeling every one of my 67 years. "We go in with the warrant, collect evidence, and make arrests if warranted by what we find," Fisher said. "Thomas will likely face charges for money laundering, tax evasion, and potentially conspiracy." The weight of it all crashed down on me. My son, who could be facing decades in prison, my reputation as a law enforcement officer, the grandchildren I might never get to see grow up if Thomas was convicted. "I want to see it," I heard myself say. "See what?" Fisher asked. "The raid. I want to watch what happens." The request surprised even me, but I knew I needed to witness this with my own eyes. Fisher studied me for a long moment. "That's highly unusual." "So is arresting the son of a decorated detective," I countered. "I won't interfere. I just need to see it for myself." After a brief discussion with her superiors via phone, Fisher reluctantly agreed. "You can observe from our surveillance vehicle, but you must remain inside at all times. Any attempt to warn your son or interfere with the operation will result in obstruction charges. Are we clear?" I nodded, a terrible numbness spreading through me as we drove back toward my son's neighborhood. I was about to watch my son's life fall apart, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The FBI surveillance van was parked on a side street with a clear view of Thomas's townhouse. Agent Fisher had me sit in the back with monitoring equipment where I could watch the operation unfold through various camera feeds. Several agents were already in position, some in tactical gear, others in plain clothes to avoid alarming the neighbors. "We go in 2 minutes," someone announced. I sat rigid, my hands clasped tightly together to stop them from shaking. The scene before me felt surreal, like watching a police procedural on television rather than my son's actual life. Through the monitors, I could see Thomas and Stephanie in their living room, clearing dinner dishes, unaware of what was about to happen. All units in position. Execute warrant. Several unmarked cars pulled up in front of the house while other agents approached from the rear. I watched as they reached the front door and knocked firmly. The commanding voice clearly announced, "FBI, we have a warrant." Through the cameras, I saw Thomas freeze mid-motion, a wine glass in his hand. Stephanie's head snapped toward the door, her eyes widening with what looked like panic rather than surprise. Thomas set down the glass and moved slowly toward the entrance. When he opened the door, the look on his face devastated me. Not confusion, not outrage at an unwarranted intrusion. It was resignation, the expression of someone who knew this day would eventually come. "Thomas Reynolds? We have a warrant to search these premises in connection with an investigation into money laundering and racketeering." The lead agent handed Thomas the warrant as others entered the home, spreading throughout the rooms with practiced efficiency. Stephanie's reaction was entirely different from my son's. While Thomas stood rooted in place, she suddenly bolted toward the stairs. 2 agents immediately intercepted her. "Ma'am, please remain where you are," one ordered firmly. "I need to get my medication," she protested unconvincingly. "We'll have an agent accompany you," came the measured response. I watched as my son was directed to sit on his own couch while agents began methodically searching the house. They examined bookshelves, moved furniture, checked behind artwork. One team headed straight for Thomas's home office, where they began gathering computers and documents. Within minutes, they found their first significant evidence, a false bottom in Thomas's desk drawer containing several flash drives and a ledger. In the master bedroom closet, behind a panel of shoes, they discovered a safe containing over $50,000 in cash and multiple passports with Thomas's photo but different names. Each new discovery was another dagger to my heart. I had raised him better than this. I had spent my life upholding the law, only to watch my son systematically break it. The most painful moment came when Thomas was formally placed under arrest. As the agent recited his Miranda rights, Thomas's eyes suddenly shifted, looking past the officers toward the street. Somehow, he had sensed my presence. his gaze finding the surveillance van where I sat watching. The look that passed between us, even through the camera and distance, contained a lifetime of emotions. Betrayal, sorrow, shame, guilt. In that moment, he knew I had been aware of the raid. Perhaps he even suspected I had played some role in it. The connection we had rebuilt over the past year shattered in an instant. Beside him, Stephanie was also being handcuffed, her composed facade finally cracking as she began crying and demanding a lawyer. The contrast between her hysterics and Thomas's quiet defeat spoke volumes. The evidence kept mounting as the search continued. Hidden compartments in furniture revealed more cash and documents. A thorough search of Thomas's home office uncovered financial records documenting years of suspicious transactions. His computers were seized, along with phones and tablets. After what seemed like hours but was probably only 45 minutes, Thomas and Stephanie were escorted to separate vehicles. As they were driven away, Agent Fisher approached the surveillance van. "We found more than expected," she informed me, her professional demeanor softening slightly in recognition of my distress. "Your son had extensive records, far beyond what we anticipated. It could actually help his case if he decides to cooperate." "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "They'll be processed and held overnight. Arraignment tomorrow morning." She hesitated. "Given the evidence we've already found, bail is unlikely." I nodded, unable to form words. "We'd like you to come to our field office tomorrow. You may have information that could be valuable to our investigation, especially regarding the broader Caldwell operation." "I'll be there," I managed. Fisher arranged for an agent to drive me to a nearby hotel, recognizing I couldn't return to my empty apartment in this state. I barely registered checking in or making my way to the room. Once alone, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing, replaying every interaction with Thomas over the past 2 years. Had there been signs I missed? Opportunities to intervene before things went so far? What had driven my son, who had every advantage, to align himself with criminals? Sleep eluded me entirely. I spent the night alternating between pacing the small room and sitting motionless, trying to reconcile the Thomas I knew with the criminal revealed tonight. When dawn finally broke, I turned on the television to find my worst fears confirmed. The local morning news was already reporting on the arrest of prominent financial consultant Don Reynolds in connection with a money laundering scheme. His company name and photo were displayed prominently. My phone began ringing relentlessly. Colleagues from my days on the force. Mutual friends. Family members. I let everything go to voicemail, unable to face their questions or sympathy. The only call I answered was from Thomas's mother, Caroline, who was understandably hysterical. "Did you know about this?" she demanded through tears. "How could this happen to our son?" I had no adequate answers for her, only the promise that I would do everything possible to understand what had happened and help Thomas if I could. Whether that meant supporting him through a guilty plea or fighting to prove some kind of innocence, I wasn't yet sure. As I prepared to head to the FBI field office, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Mr. Reynolds," came a smooth, unfamiliar voice. "I believe we have a mutual interest in your son's situation." I felt a chill run down my spine. Who is this? Someone who can help Thomas, or make things much worse, depending on certain decisions. We should talk. I ended the call immediately, my hands shaking. The Caldwell organization was already reaching out, which meant Thomas was deeply entangled indeed. This was only the beginning of a nightmare that would test every value I had ever held dear and every bond of family loyalty I had ever known. The county detention center smelled exactly like every other correctional facility I had visited during my career, a nauseating mixture of industrial disinfectant, stale air, and human desperation. I sat in the visitors area, waiting for Thomas to be brought in, rehearsing what I would say, though I knew any prepared speech would likely crumble the moment I saw him. When the guard finally escorted him in, I barely recognized my son. Just one night in custody had transformed him. His designer clothes were replaced by an orange jumpsuit, his carefully styled hair disheveled, dark circles prominent beneath his bloodshot eyes. His wrists were cuffed in front of him, a sight that sent a physical pain through my chest. The guard removed the cuffs and left us in the small room with its scratched plexiglass divider and uncomfortable plastic chairs. For several long moments, neither of us spoke, the weight of everything between us too heavy for words. You knew, Thomas finally said, his voice flat, emotionless. You left dinner because you knew they were coming. I considered lying, offering some comforting fiction, but we were well past that. I was warned. An FBI agent contacted me just before the raid. A bitter laugh escaped him. And your first instinct was to help them instead of your own son. My first instinct was to find out the truth, I corrected. To understand what was happening before taking any action. Thomas's expression hardened. So you watched them arrest me, your own son. Did you enjoy the show, Dad? Was it like old times, seeing the bad guy taken down? His words cut deep, but I refused to be baited into an argument that would waste our limited time. Thomas, I need you to be straight with me, all of it. How you got involved, how deep you're in, what these people have on you. I can't help if I don't know what we're dealing with. Help? He scoffed. You think you can flash your retired detective badge and make this disappear? They found everything, Dad. The records, the cash, the accounts. I'm looking at 20 years minimum. Then you have nothing to lose by telling me the truth, I insisted, leaning forward. Talk to me, son. Not as a cop, but as your father. Something in my tone must have reached him because his defensive posture slowly crumbled. He dropped his head into his hands, his shoulders beginning to shake. When he looked up again, I saw the frightened boy beneath the man's facade. It wasn't supposed to go this far, he began, his voice barely audible. 2 years ago, the business was failing. I had 3 big clients pull out within a month. The mortgage on the house, Stephanie's spending habits, trying to keep up appearances. I was drowning. He described how, at a charity gala, he had been approached by Victor Caldwell himself, who presented himself as a legitimate businessman interested in investment opportunities. The initial proposal seemed legitimate enough, consulting on offshore investments for cash-heavy businesses. The first few jobs paid incredibly well for minimal work, Thomas continued. Just advice, really, nothing illegal. Then Jason Weber, Caldwell's financial guy, started asking for more, using my business to move money, creating fake clients and transactions. By the time I realized what was happening, I was already implicated in earlier deals. Why didn't you come to me? I asked, the question that had been burning in my mind since this began. Thomas laughed humorlessly. Come to my straight-arrow detective father and admit I was working for criminals? How would that conversation have gone, Dad? He had a point. Our relationship had always been complicated by my rigid moral standards and his desire to impress me. Would I have responded with understanding or with judgment? What about Stephanie? Was she involved? I asked. Thomas's expression changed, a mixture of pain and rage crossing his features. Stephanie, that's the best part of this whole mess. Do you know who she really is, Dad? She's Caldwell's niece. The whole relationship was a setup from the beginning. The revelation stunned me. What? They put her in my path, made sure we would meet. She was their insurance policy, their way of keeping me in line. Every time I tried to back out, she would remind me of what they could do to me, to you. Thomas's voice broke. They threatened you specifically, Dad. Said they knew where you lived, your routines. Said if I didn't cooperate, they would make sure Chicago's decorated detective had an unfortunate accident. A cold dread settled in my stomach. The threats explained much about Thomas's continued involvement, but not how it began. That doesn't excuse your initial choice, I said carefully. You stepped into this willingly, even if staying was coerced. I know, he admitted, surprising me with his honesty. I wanted the money, the status. Stephanie kept pushing for more. Bigger house, luxury vacations, expensive jewelry. I told myself it was victimless, just moving numbers around. By the time I understood who I was really working for, what they really did to people, I was trapped. We sat in silence as I processed everything. My son had made terrible choices, motivated by greed and status anxiety, then found himself unable to escape the consequences. He was both perpetrator and victim. The FBI wants me to cooperate, Thomas said after a while. Give them Caldwell in exchange for leniency. And will you? Fear flashed across his face. These people don't play games, Dad. Witnesses against Caldwell have a way of disappearing before trial. The alternative is spending the next 2 decades in prison, I reminded him. Is that what you want? What I want? Thomas's voice rose in frustration. What I want is to go back 2 years and never shake Caldwell's hand. What I want is to have come to you before it was too late. What I want is not to have wasted my life on this fantasy of success that turned into a nightmare. The raw honesty of his words struck me. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, Thomas was speaking without pretense or manipulation. "It's not too late," I told him, reaching across to grasp his hand. "Not completely. You've made terrible mistakes, and there will be consequences. But how you respond now determines what kind of man you really are." Thomas looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps seeing the father who had always believed in his potential rather than the cop who represented judgment. "Will you help me?" he asked, sounding younger than I had heard him in decades. The question hung between us, laden with complexity. Help him cooperate with authorities, help him navigate the legal system, help him find redemption, or help him escape justice. "I will help you do the right thing," I said finally, "whatever that turns out to be. But Thomas, I need you to be completely honest with me moving forward. No more lies, no matter how painful the truth might be." As our time ended, and the guard came to take him back to his cell, Thomas stood with a new resolve in his stance. "I'm sorry, Dad, for all of it, but especially for betraying everything you stand for." Those words stayed with me long after I left the detention center, carrying both the weight of his crimes and the first glimmer of hope that my son might find his way back to the values I had tried to instill in him. The day after my visit with Thomas, I called Frank Wilson, my former partner from the detective division. Despite being retired for 5 years himself, Frank maintained connections throughout law enforcement in Chicago. We met at a small diner far from my usual haunts, away from prying eyes and potential Caldwell surveillance. "Jesus? Don?" Frank said after I explained the situation. "Your kid got mixed up with Victor Caldwell? That's about as bad as it gets." "I know," I replied grimly. "That's why I need your help. I need to understand what we're really dealing with here." Frank leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Caldwell's organization is sophisticated. They've got judges in their pocket, cops on payroll. They're not street thugs, they're businessmen with enforcers. And they're patient. They'll wait years to take revenge if someone crosses them." Over the next several days, Frank and I worked together, gathering information through unofficial channels. We learned that Caldwell's operation was even more extensive than publicly known, with tentacles reaching into real estate, import businesses, and city contracts. "The feds have been building a case against Caldwell for years," Frank told me after meeting with a contact in the U.S. Attorney's office. "Thomas could be valuable to them, but they need hard evidence, not just testimony." Meanwhile, I used my limited visiting privileges to continue talking with Thomas, building a complete picture of his involvement. During one such visit, he provided the information I had been waiting for. "There's a hidden partition on my home computer," he confessed. "Password protected. It contains backup copies of everything, all the transactions, communications, meetings. I kept it as insurance, though I never really thought I'd use it." "You documented your own crimes?" I asked incredulously. "I documented their crimes," he corrected. "Names, dates, amounts. Recordings of conversations with Caldwell himself. If something happened to me, it would all automatically upload to several email addresses, including the FBI. This was exactly what Agent Fisher needed. I arranged a meeting with her the same day, sharing what Thomas had revealed. "If what you're saying is accurate, this could be game-changing evidence," she said, immediately organizing a technical team to search for the hidden files. They found them exactly where Thomas had indicated, a treasure trove of incriminating information that implicated dozens of Caldwell associates and Caldwell himself. With this new evidence, the prosecution had significant leverage. I also requested a meeting with Stephanie, who was being held separately from Thomas. After pulling strings and signing numerous disclaimers, I was granted 15 minutes with her under strict supervision. Unlike Thomas, who had shown remorse and vulnerability, Stephanie remained cold and composed despite her circumstances. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped impatiently on the table between us. "I have nothing to say to you," she stated flatly when I entered. "Then you can listen," I replied, sitting across from her. "I know who you are. I know about your uncle. I know you were placed in my son's life to manipulate him." A flicker of surprise crossed her features before she regained control. "Prove it." "Thomas already has. He's cooperating fully with the FBI now. Names, dates, recordings, account numbers, everything." I watched her carefully, noting how her confident expression faltered slightly, including details about how Victor Caldwell's niece was instructed to pursue a relationship with him to ensure his cooperation. Stephanie's mask finally slipped, revealing the calculating woman beneath. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. Victor will never see the inside of a courtroom. People who testify against him have accidents." "Is that a threat?" I asked calmly. "It's a reality," she replied. "Thomas is dead if he cooperates. So are you." I leaned forward. "Let me share a different reality with you, Stephanie. Your uncle's organization is finished. The evidence Thomas provided implicates everyone, including you. The smart play now is to save yourself." For the first time, uncertainty showed in her eyes. I pressed the advantage. "Thomas was a means to an end for you. I understand that. Business, not personal. So make the business decision now. Cooperate in exchange for leniency." I left her with that thought, unsure if I had made any impact. But within 48 hours, Agent Fisher informed me that Stephanie had begun preliminary discussions about a potential cooperation agreement. With Thomas's evidence and Stephanie's potential testimony, the case against Caldwell was strengthening, but the danger was also escalating. 2 days after my visit with Stephanie, I returned to my apartment to find signs of a break-in. Nothing was taken, but a clear message had been left on my kitchen table, a single bullet with my name scratched into it. The threat was unmistakable. Caldwell knew about Thomas's cooperation and was sending a warning. I reported the incident to Agent Fisher, who immediately arranged for protection. "We need to move faster," she insisted. "Caldwell clearly knows we're building a case. He'll start eliminating witnesses and evidence." Together with the FBI team, we developed a strategy to use Thomas's knowledge to set up a sting operation. The plan was risky, but potentially decisive. Thomas would reach out to Jason Weber, Caldwell's financial advisor, claiming to have hidden additional records as insurance. He would offer to exchange these records for protection from prosecution. The meeting was arranged at a hotel downtown, with FBI agents covering every entrance and exit. Thomas, wearing a wire, entered the conference room where Weber waited. I observed from a surveillance room, my heart pounding as my son walked into danger. The conversation began cautiously, with Weber probing for information about what evidence Thomas had and who else knew about it. "I kept separate books," Thomas explained, following our agreed script. "Everything is documented, including Victor's direct instructions, but I'm willing to hand it all over and forget what I know in exchange for being left alone." Weber seemed suspicious. "You expect Victor to just let you walk away after everything that's happened?" "I expect him to make a business decision," Thomas replied smoothly. "Prosecuting me means exposing his entire operation. Letting me disappear quietly with some startup cash means this all goes away." The negotiation continued for nearly an hour, with Weber gradually revealing more about Caldwell's concerns and contingency plans. Finally, he made a call, speaking cryptically before hanging up with a nod. "Victor wants to meet, tonight, to discuss terms directly." This was more than we had hoped for. If Caldwell himself appeared, they could arrest him on the spot with incriminating statements on record. The second meeting was set for midnight at an industrial property owned by one of Caldwell's shell companies. Despite the FBI's concerns, Thomas insisted on going through with it. "This is my chance to make things right," he told me before departing with the tactical team. "I got myself into this mess. I need to help end it." I waited in the command center, watching through body cameras as the operation unfolded. Thomas entered the warehouse, again wired for sound, while FBI agents positioned themselves throughout the surrounding area. To everyone's surprise, Caldwell actually appeared, flanked by 2 bodyguards. He was a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, more resembling a corporate CEO than a crime boss. His demeanor was calm, almost genial, as he greeted Thomas. "Mr. Reynolds, you've caused quite a stir in my organization." "Not my intention," Thomas replied steadily. "I just want out. Few people leave my employment so abruptly," Caldwell said, his tone hardening. "It creates complications." The conversation continued, with Caldwell gradually incriminating himself further with each statement. He referenced specific money laundering transactions, threatened Thomas explicitly, and outlined how he had manipulated Thomas through Stephanie. When Caldwell finally offered Thomas a deal, a clear bribe to obstruct justice, the FBI had what they needed. Agents swarmed the warehouse, arresting Caldwell, his bodyguards, and for appearance's sake, Thomas as well. The operation was a complete success. Caldwell was taken into custody, along with several high-ranking members of his organization who had been arrested in simultaneous raids. The evidence collected from the sting, combined with Thomas's records and Stephanie's eventual testimony, created an airtight case. In the aftermath, the U.S. Attorney offered Thomas a plea deal in recognition of his cooperation. 5 years instead of the 25 he potentially faced. It was still substantial prison time, but far less than he would have served otherwise. "Do you think I should take it?" Thomas asked me when we discussed the offer. 5 years is a long time, I acknowledged, but it's also a second chance, which is more than many get. The question is, what will you do with that chance when you get out? My son nodded thoughtfully. "I want to make things right, not just legally but with you, with myself." The pride I felt in that moment was complicated but genuine. Thomas had made terrible choices, but when faced with their consequences, he had found the courage to do the right thing, even at great personal risk. "Then take the deal," I told him. "Serve your time honorably, and know that I'll be here when you get out." Thomas accepted the plea agreement the next day, bringing a measure of resolution to the legal aspects of our ordeal. But the personal journey of reconciliation and redemption was only beginning. 3 months after Thomas accepted his plea deal, I sat across from him in the visiting room of the minimum security federal prison where he was serving his sentence. Already, I could see changes in him. The designer clothes and carefully cultivated image were gone, replaced by a prison uniform and a simpler, more authentic presence. "The financial literacy class is going well," he told me, a genuine enthusiasm in his voice. "Most of these guys have never had a bank account or understood how credit works. Teaching them feels meaningful." Thomas had found purpose in using his financial knowledge constructively, volunteering to teach other inmates basic money management and entrepreneurship skills. It was a small redemption but significant. "I'm proud of you," I told him, meaning it completely for perhaps the first time in many years. Our weekly visits became a cornerstone of both our lives. We talked about everything, rebuilding our relationship on honesty rather than appearances. Thomas spoke openly about his mistakes, his regrets, and his hopes for the future. I shared stories from my career that I had previously kept from him, the moral complexities and hard choices that law enforcement often entailed. 6 months into Thomas's sentence, I received an unexpected call from Caroline, Thomas's mother and my ex-wife. We had barely spoken in years beyond necessary communications about our son. "Don," she said hesitantly, "I've been thinking. Maybe we should visit Thomas together next week." This gesture of reconciliation touched me deeply. Our divorce had been bitter, with Caroline blaming my dedication to police work for the failure of our marriage. But Thomas's situation had reminded us both of what truly mattered. Our joint visit marked the beginning of a healing process for our fractured family. Though Caroline and I would never reconcile romantically, we found a way to be supportive co-parents again, even with our son in his 30s. Meanwhile, I had begun my own journey of reflection. How had I missed the signs of Thomas's illegal activities? Had my rigid moral stance made it impossible for him to come to me when he first faced financial difficulties? These questions led me to start a support group for family members of white-collar offenders, creating a space where others facing similar situations could find understanding and guidance. The group grew quickly, attracting parents, spouses, and children dealing with the shame and practical challenges of having a loved one imprisoned for financial crimes. Through helping others, I found healing for my own sense of failure as a father. Thomas continued to serve his time with remarkable purpose. Beyond teaching financial literacy, he became a model inmate, mediating conflicts and mentoring younger prisoners. His background in finance made him valuable to prison administration, and he was given responsibilities helping manage various educational programs. Due to his exemplary behavior and full cooperation with ongoing Caldwell prosecutions, Thomas became eligible for early release after serving just 3 years. The day I drove to pick him up from prison was filled with complex emotions: joy at his freedom, anxiety about his reintegration, hope for our future relationship. When Thomas walked through the gates, I barely recognized him. Gone was any trace of the slick financial consultant with something to hide. In his place stood a man with clear eyes and humble confidence. "I never thought I'd say this," he admitted as we drove away from the facility, "but prison saved me. It stripped away everything I was hiding behind." Thomas's journey of amends had only begun. Upon release, he faced significant challenges: a felony record, restrictions on financial employment, and the social stigma of his crimes. But he approached these obstacles with remarkable resilience. Unable to return to traditional financial consulting, Thomas found a new path using his expertise. With my encouragement, he approached the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, offering to work as a consultant, helping investigate complex fraud schemes. After thorough vetting, and given his extensive cooperation in the Caldwell case, they cautiously accepted. It's ironic, Thomas reflected over dinner one evening, 6 months after his release. I'm doing what I always wanted, using my financial skills in meaningful work. But it took losing everything to find that meaning. Thomas's insights into money laundering techniques proved invaluable to several federal investigations. He could recognize patterns and structures that even experienced investigators missed. What had once made him an effective criminal now made him an effective crime fighter. The most profound change, however, was in our relationship. The walls of pretense and judgment between us had fallen, replaced by genuine understanding. We spoke weekly, not from obligation but from desire. We enjoyed simple pleasures together, fishing trips, baseball games, conversations about books and ideas rather than status and appearances. One evening, as we sat on my back porch watching the sunset, Thomas asked the question that had clearly been on his mind for some time. "Do you think you'll ever fully forgive me, Dad, for everything I put you through?" I considered the question carefully, knowing he deserved an honest answer. "I already have," I told him, "but that doesn't mean I've forgotten or that the hurt completely disappears. Forgiveness isn't about erasing the past. It's about not letting it poison the future." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "That's what I'm trying to do every day. Not forget my mistakes, but learn from them without being defined by them." This wisdom, earned through painful experience, was the silver lining of our ordeal. Thomas had discovered authentic values to replace the hollow pursuit of status and wealth. I had learned that true justice includes both accountability and mercy. In the years that followed, Thomas continued his consulting work with law enforcement, eventually expanding to educational programs teaching financial institutions how to better identify money laundering schemes. He lived modestly but purposefully, finding satisfaction in work that mattered rather than in luxury and appearances. Our monthly dinner tradition resumed, but with a crucial difference. Honesty and authenticity replaced pretense and performance. Sometimes Caroline joined us, creating moments of family healing I had thought impossible. The journey from that fateful text message to where we stand today has been long and painful, but ultimately redemptive. It taught me that sometimes the greatest act of love is allowing those we care about to face the consequences of their actions while standing beside them as they rebuild. If you're watching this and facing your own family crisis, remember that the darkest moments can lead to unexpected light. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between loyalty and integrity? Share your story in the comments below. And if this journey of betrayal and redemption resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe to hear more stories of life's difficult lessons, and share this with someone who might need to hear that second chances are possible, even after terrible mistakes. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, it's never too late to choose a different path.